returns are most people getting in ETH on average right now inside Fast Track?
10% per month is a good rule of thumb, Lucas. And for ETH, yeah. So we're just talking about ETH stablecoin pairs here, and this strategy here on VFAT has been working exceptionally well for the last couple of months, and we've just started to bring this content to everyone in the UIG because we have the settings nailed down now in VFAT.
But don't worry, we're gonna be talking about it, everyone. Like, I'm gonna be picking David's brain on settings here.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about it because to do over 200% in ETH stablecoin pairs, how in the world is this possible? And you might say yes, well, but your range is so narrow. But is it? Because what's the ATR of ETH? What's the average true range of ETH over the last month? And over the last 2 weeks, maybe. And so how much volatility do you expect in that underlying asset, which in this case is ETH? Well, if you expect ETH to move by less than 7% up and down, then a 7% wide range may not be too narrow. And so what we're seeing here is that 7% wide is not too narrow. However, there is such a thing, Lucas, as a range that is too narrow. And so this is about the limit, in my opinion. I think that anything more narrow than this can lead to more rebalances than necessary, and that is the enemy of our returns.
I've been playing with it, so everyone knows I've been playing with an extreme version of 1% to 2%, and it's not, the fees are just eating up into the overall profits. So I wanted to run that experiment for a week to try to prove David wrong, but he wins.
So, there is such a thing as a range that is too narrow. But remember, I want to concentrate my liquidity in the most narrow range possible to increase my yield. And Lucas, another thing that's important to consider here is your slippage. You can't be paying up in slippage. So I've tested out, 0.1%. I've tested 0.5%, and I landed on 0.25% with these two aggregators. So I have this set as a global setting now, the 0.25%. I'm not using Kyber swap anymore at all. I had many, transactions revert with Kyber swap. So instead, I unchecked it. I've only got Paraswap and Odos running here. My slippage set to 0.25%. And then if you go up here to the settings, Lucas, you just want to make sure that you have turned on automations. And, for me, I've chosen to auto harvest my pending Arrow rewards and then swap them for USDC. And so what I've been seeing is that once I hit $50, so the way that the auto harvest works is if I just open up this position as an example, and I click on harvest here, and then I scroll down to update auto harvest settings right here, it says, auto harvest will automatically harvest your position with optimal frequency. And so what this means, optimal frequency, what it means is that when your position, an individual position, reaches $50 in earned Arrow emissions, then that will be harvested for you. So it does it every $50. So for me, I've got this set to harvest and swap for USDC. So every day, I'm seeing, over the last couple of weeks, I've been seeing, above $300 a day between my two portfolios here. So I've got 29K in this portfolio, and then in another portfolio, I've got another 24, almost 25K. So this together has been doing extremely well. But we must have a firm understanding of how this yield is being generated, Lucas. That is critically important. And this is really what we cover in Fast Track is, new strategies like this, using these slipstream pools on Aerodrome.
And I want to be clear on this too, everyone, is like, that's why I was hesitant to post VFAT, because this is a constant conversation when a new tool comes out. This is like, we're constantly testing it. So I know there's a lot of the community that's like going crazy for VFAT. I mean, if we haven't kind of even mastered the basics yet and just like played with concentrated liquidity and other tools, starting to play with, auto rebalancing and setting ranges and playing with all these little settings, it'll be really overwhelming if this is your first attempt. So just keep that in mind. We are constantly testing these, and I absolutely plan to keep bringing David on and sharing the updates on it. But David, I think it's fair to say that strategies are kind of changing, and we're trying to figure out what works best and what's optimal for VFAT, but it is not a set it, forget it. Every single setting is the same for each pool. Like there's a lot that goes into it. And you do look at charts and make decisions on which range for which positions based on the underlying assets.
Absolutely. And, the underlying, that is the single most important thing to get right, because you can't enter positions where the underlying is going to, be extremely volatile. And if you do, you have to go into that with eyes open. And, I see a comment in the chat here, Lucas. David Hay is asking that he would love to understand my overall profitability. And so if I could just touch on that for a quick moment. What I'm seeing here, David Hay and everyone else, is that my deposit value, so the capital that I've deposited into these ETH stablecoin pairs on Aerodrome through VFAT, my deposited capital is remaining steady. The value of my positions is tracking the price of ETH. And yet I'm earning this massive yield on top of it. So I hope that speaks to my overall profitability. And, on a monthly basis, 166% is well above, 10% per month.
How accurate are those numbers? Because on my VFAT, the projected APR is not fully lining up to what I'm actually seeing, and I'm still troubleshooting some of that. Have you kind of investigated a little bit of that?
This fluctuates so quickly and so often that what I'm seeing is that overall, Lucas, I'm doing about 10% per month on this base of capital here. So it's been doing extremely well. And, my exposure here is to ETH. So when it comes to building a portfolio, I think that it's critically important that we start with a foundation in blue chip asset pairs. And this is really, an amazing way. This is as good as it gets. And so I'm going to stay here until this strategy doesn't work any longer. And so how do we determine that? Well, we need to be able to track some metrics around Aerodrome and how votes, how different pools are being voted on by the Aero voters.
We're going to get a little more complex here, but just stick with us.
I'm just going to run through it real quick, real quick. Yeah, so there's three metrics that we need to track. We need to track the number of votes that a specific pool is receiving each epoch. We need to track the amount of TVL over time in a specific pool. And we need to track the amount of Aero emissions that are being allocated to each pool, each epoch. As long as we can track those three things, then we can determine, hey, we just had a new epoch start today. So moving forward, do we expect yield to increase, decrease, or stay the same in these ETH stablecoin pairs? And turns out, if we scroll down here, you see where it says weekly rewards, Lucas, right here? So this is the pool of Aero allocated to this specific wrapped ETH USDC pool. And this is done each epoch. So this is based on voting and incentivization. And this pool of Aero right here is, over the course of this epoch, going to be distributed to active, staked, and in-range TVL. So this figure here, this is everyone else that we're competing with for this pool of Aero over the next 6 days, the rest of this epoch. So that's been working extremely well. But this is just one strategy that's been working extremely well. There are many fast track clients who really like Solana, and I do too. Solana is great. It's fast. There's a ton of user adoption. And so, a position that's been working extremely well for me for the last, since November. But I've just been tracking SOL up and down with the same basic capital in a $33 wide range for months, and doing 0.2 or 0.3% per day when volumes are low, And when volumes are extremely high, you'll see this tick up to well above 1% per day. So
Daniel just left a comment. Daniel, re-listen to the call. We definitely, David sets at least minimum is going to be 7% range. So if you're super tight, you will see what you're seeing. You've got to go what you're seeing. You've got to go a little wider. We got to, yeah, all good, Daniel. Definitely watch the recording on that. We touch it. Never right.
Yeah.
Ranges will wreck you. And same with Orca here. Like, I hope we're seeing a trend here. Just for everyone on here who's maybe just getting started or midway through, or they're getting this, we're talking blue chip stuff here. I get a little concerned when I see someone's portfolio is all Brett and something else. I'm like, great, you're happy right now. But when I see markets dip and people are like 60% of my pool, 60% of my portfolio has taken a hit, I'm like, what are you in to get a 60% correction? Because if you're in blue chip stuff, you won't see that. Your portfolio, like David is saying, will track with the price of Bitcoin, ETH, maybe Sol, and maybe some other top alts. But if we're all in Brett and we're chasing yield, like, how many times do we have to keep learning that lesson until we're like, okay, I won't do that anymore? Patience, long-term, you will win the game. And what do you think of that, D?
I think that it's critically important to have a long-term perspective and to not chase yield. I see so many people get hurt by chasing yield in the short term. And that takes a couple of different forms, either setting a range that is too narrow or entering a position with assets that are extremely volatile, like meme pairs, or over allocating to high risk pairs. And how do you know if you're allocated to a high risk